Welcome to God and Country Biblical Exposition. In my program last week, I mentioned that President Trump is working to overturn at least 7 sacred cows cherished by those on the ideological left: transgenderism, DEI, open borders, global warming, abortion, fiscal lawlessness, and judicial lawlessness. These are all false beliefs and false practices based on a godless worldview. With executive orders and cabinet appointees, Trump is using a blitzkrieg strategy to topple leftist policies before Democrats even have time to react. And that approach could actually be the subject of an entire program. In fact, with what Trump has done over the last 2 weeks, I have enough topics to last me an entire year. All this winning, like Trump said in his campaign. We need to listen to that clip again.
You're going to be so proud of your country if I get in. You're going to be so proud of your president, and I don't care about that. But you are going to be so proud of your country because we're going to turn it around and we're going to start winning again. We're going to win so much. We're going to win at every level. We're going to win economically. We're going to win with the economy. We're going to win with military. We're going to win with health care and for our veterans. We're going to win with every single facet. We're going to win so much, you may even get tired of winning. And you'll say, please, please, it's too much winning. We can't take it anymore. Mr. President, it's too much. And I'll say, no, it isn't. We have to keep winning. We have to win more. We're going to win more. We're going to win so much.
So the subject I'd like to tackle for this week is President Trump's immigration policy. And I've entitled this program, Deportation Can Be Compassion. We have a lot to cover. First, a quick review of what's happening. Trump put tariffs on Mexico and Canada until they stopped the flow of illegal immigrants into America. Make no mistake about it, Mexico did not stop the caravans. Thousands of people walking through their country right into the United States. Also, in the last 9 days, ISIS has arrested more than 7,400 people, illegal immigrants. And by using military C-130s, the U.S. has sent back to their home countries about 2,000 or 3,000 immigrants. The goal is to deport 1,500 daily, about 500,000 per year. Under the Biden administration, illegal immigrants reporting into the country about 2,000 or 3,000 per day. So it's going to take a lot of work to deport all those people. The left-leaning media is complaining that there's going to be such an expense to deport all of these people, that this is unsustainable. But given the price of a military transport, comes out to about $3,000 or $4,000 per illegal immigrant. But according to the Federation for American Immigration Reform, each illegal alien costs the federal government about $8,766 in social services every year. That's about $150 billion total per year. Therefore, the cost of deporting these illegals is a bargain. Last week, Trump also instructed our military prison in Cuba, Guantanamo, to prepare to receive 30,000 illegal immigrants. Why? Some of these illegals are so violent that if they were sent back to their home countries, they would just turn around, come right back into the United States to continue their drug smuggling and their crime. The crimes committed by these illegals are now coming out. They're horrendous. These are murderers, rapists, drug dealers, terrorizing communities. It's amazing that for the last 4 years, Biden tied the hands of ICE, so they couldn't do anything. And the Democrat politicians have been saying all along, nobody should be called illegal, nobody should ever be deported. Even under the Biden administration, ICE was prohibited from calling these people illegal immigrants. In a recent New York Times poll, 87% of the public agrees that criminal illegal aliens should be deported. 87%. And this is why Democrat politicians and the media, but I repeat myself, are keeping generally quiet about these deportations. For now. Because the public is cheering this on. Even Americans, Hispanic Americans, are for these deportations. Here's an article from Newsweek and another from the New York Post. Majority of Hispanics support the deportation of illegal immigrants. Why? Well, because they had to wait in line to get here legally, and now all of these others are just pouring in over the border, ruining immigration for everyone. Now, Trump's main priority is to deport criminal illegal aliens. But in the sweeps, ISIS is also arresting and deporting any illegal alien. Here's a story from this past weekend. ICE did a workplace raid on a car wash in Philadelphia and arrested 7 of the workers. You know, this is something that most Americans have forgotten, or rather, they're wrongly informed about. If someone comes over the border and claims asylum, that doesn't mean they receive legal asylum. There's no asylum just because you live in a country with high crime and you don't have a very good job. That was the claim of the vast majority of people crossing the border claiming asylum. And the Biden administration and the Democrats and these organizations facilitating the immigration were breaking the law by telling these people they could come into America by simply claiming asylum, simply because you had a hard life back home. This was the lawlessness of the Biden administration because they wanted to flood the country with immigrants. And we'll get to that in just a minute. But to continue, not only are there these deportations, but Trump's agenda is also being backed up with new administrative policy. For example, the House and the Senate both passed the Lake and Riley bill that allows criminal aliens to be deported. This is huge because this is more than just an executive order. This gives ICE all the authority they need to deport any immigrant who has broken the law. Additionally, Ron DeSantis and many other governors are proposing bills that are going to prohibit illegal aliens from receiving public benefits. The new Department of Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, announced a halting of all funds going to NGOs that facilitate illegal immigration. And these NGOs were the source of these migrant caravans. Trump also signed an executive order halting all anchor babies, birthright citizenship, so that babies born in the United States are no longer automatically U.S. citizens. And of course, a leftist judge overturned that order, so it's going to go to the Supreme Court. But it's obvious that the 14th Amendment of the Constitution didn't allow for anchor babies, birthright citizenship. The 14th Amendment was simply about, after the Civil War, allowing slaves to become American citizens. So that's just a quick review of what's going on. There's a whole lot more. That's just a start. The second issue I want to discuss is what the Democrats and the Biden administration have done in regard to immigration and why. Most Americans are clueless concerning what the Biden administration was doing in secret, and the media certainly kept the public in the dark. Remember, the first rule of warfare is deceit. Most people assume that these migrants were coming into the country spontaneously, that this was an indigenous movement, that these migrants were taking the initiative to form these caravans and come to America. But no, the Biden administration was not only inviting these people to come, they were enticing these people to come and funding their way through NGOs, non-governmental organizations, funded by the UN, and even by our own State Department. These caravans of immigrants, tens of thousands of people marching through Mexico every month, they didn't start on their own. There were ideological operators going through these communities advertising these caravans. The Biden administration even set up continual plane flights, bringing in immigrants who they labeled as refugees. This was the Biden CHNV program, which stands for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans, where these people would be flown into the United States if they would have sponsors to support them. And that amounted to merely pro-immigration organizations simply saying that we will vouch for them. And this is why towns like Springfield, Ohio, all of a sudden were forced to welcome 15,000 Haitian immigrants who changed the entire town into a Haitian colony. So why was the Biden administration and the Democrats doing all this? The ideology of DEI, diversity. These people truly believe that America is too white, too European, and the only fair and virtuous thing to do is to force America to become more ethnically diverse through forced immigration. That sounds crazy, but this is what these people believe. This is their religion. Without a biblical Christian worldview, everything is about race and racial identity. The color of one's skin is everything. So there needs to be affirmative action to turn America into a more racially diverse country. Because you can't have a country that's mostly European, according to their ideology. That alone, for them, would be wrong and racist on its face. Now, of course, there's no talk about making Africa more white, or Brazil less Hispanic or Portuguese, or making China less Asian, because now you're thinking logically. But this is not about logic. This is about their own racism and bitterness toward America. If you don't understand this motivation, you're going to think illegal immigration is all about compassion. It's not. It's about racism going under the pretext of compassion. You think I'm making this up? Here's an article from the leftist Brookings Institute entitled, "Immigration is about making America a more diverse population." And these people actually believe this is their God-given duty to remake the racial makeup of America because for them, everything is about race. And we know that the Bible condemns such thinking. 2 Corinthians 5:16, condemning those who recognize people merely according to the flesh. Now, by the way, if you oppose open borders like Trump, you're accused of being a white supremacist. But who are the real racists? Here's another proof that the Biden administration didn't just allow illegal immigration, but they were pushing for it. The CBP1 app created by the Biden administration back in 2020. They actually created an app so that migrants can check in on the phone. As soon as they get close to the border, they aren't illegal. All they have to do is sign up on the app. So, okay, come on in. You haven't signed up? Well, then come back to the office and we'll help you sign up. And then we'll just release you into the country. We'll also give you a court date. Oh, by the way, that court date will be scheduled 10 years in the future because there are 4 million other immigrants ahead of you. But just go ahead, go into the country and go find a place to live. These asylum dates were actually being scheduled 10 years in the future. Trump shut down the app in the first week. Also, when Biden took office, he suspended the policy of collecting DNA samples from the migrants. This way, without the samples, there's no way to track these people. There's no way to tell which children belong to who. And maybe that was the plan. Flood the system, destroy the system. Now, the motivation for open borders wasn't simply leftist racism. It also included social destruction and globalism. Again, you have to understand how these people think. And here are 3 concepts you should know: accelerationism, deterritorialization, and the fourth turning. First, accelerationism. It's a philosophy that since it's believed that society is going to collapse anyway, we might as well get it over with, help it along, pull the Band-Aid off as fast as we can. And this is the justification put out there by many world leaders, causing them to do things that would collapse the world economy. Because for them, that's the only way to bring about a reset and a truly just society. Deterritorialization, here's a formal definition of this. In critical theory, deterritorialization is the process by which a social relation, called a territory, has its current organization and context altered, muted, or destroyed. The component then constitutes a new territory, which is the process of re-territorialization. Now, the word deterritorialization refers to destroying cultural norms and relationships. But the globalists want to literally deterritorialize the world. Now, if you ask AI about Marxism and destruction, this is what you're going to get. Marxism is a philosophy of destruction. That's a common criticism of Marxist ideology, which argues that to achieve a classless society, the existing capitalist system must be completely overthrown, often through revolutionary means, which can be interpreted as a formal or societal destruction of the current order. However, Marxists would argue that this is a necessary step toward a new and better society, not simply destruction for its own sake. Unquote. Well, notice that Marxism, cultural Marxism, economic Marxism, is the philosophy of deconstruction, deterritorialization. And the final concept we should be aware of is the fourth turning. In the book, An American Prophecy, the fourth turning, what the cycles of history tell us about America's next rendezvous with destiny. It's a philosophy of Strauss and Howe from back in the 1980s. And it's a bunch of unbiblical nonsense, but it's even been picked up by some evangelical teachers as gospel truth. But the point is that society supposedly goes through a cycle every 100 years. A high, then an awakening, then an unraveling, then a crisis. And in the crisis, there is a reimagining of the future. And the mindset is that we need to get to that crisis if we're going to fix society. So you got those three new terms: accelerationism, deterritorialization, and the fourth turning. There are many educated elites who actually think in these terms. They want to see everything burn. They want to see America collapse. They want to see the population of America replaced, because these are people who are haters of the good. They're filled with bitterness and envy. They were happy to see the California fires. As far as they're concerned, they wish the whole country would burn up. To quote Alfred in The Dark Knight, some men just want to watch the world burn. So don't overlook the fact that this leftist ideology is fueling open border policy. Now, my third point, the Christian response or the moral response, and it has to do with priorities and values. Are your opinions truly biblical values and priorities, or are they just influences by the world? The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops complained about Trump's executive orders cracking down on illegal aliens. Now, bear in mind that the Conference of Catholic Bishops receives $100 million a year from the federal government to resettle immigrants. And that money is fungible, going to even support current church operations. And bear in mind that the Vatican in Rome, which is considered a separate country, has a wall around it. And people are not allowed to enter in and take up residence. So J.D. Vance responded to the Catholic Conference, quote, "As a practicing Catholic, I'm actually heartbroken by that statement. I think that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops needs to actually look in the mirror a little bit and recognize that when they receive over $100 million to help resettle illegal immigrants, are they worried about humanitarian concerns, or are they actually worried about the bottom line? We're going to enforce immigration law, and we're going to protect the American people. So Vance goes on to point out the hypocrisy of taking $100 million in government payouts and then remain silent concerning the countless young women who are being sex trafficked and raped and murdered, thanks to Democrat open borders. Quote from Vance, I believe the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, if they're worried about the humanitarian costs of immigration enforcement, let them talk about the children who have been sex trafficked because of the wide open borders of Joe Biden. I think the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has frankly not been a good partner in common sense immigration enforcement that the American people voted for. And I hope again, as a devout Catholic, that they'll do better. Also, as evangelical Christians, Christianity Today, which everyone knows has gone woke, also had a similar response to Trump's executive orders as the Catholic Conference, emphasizing compassion on the illegal immigrants, but totally ignoring all of the accompanying evils. Their response to Trump's policy was all about how he was victimizing the illegal immigrants. And in their response, there was not a word about the victims of illegal criminals. Not about a word about we need to get these criminals out of the country. So Chris Queen, a writer for PJ Media, had this article. Christianity Today chooses political enemies over biblical truth. Trump is made out to be a villain in stopping illegal immigration. That's the whole emphasis of the writers at Christianity Today. To quote from Chris, this is long, but it's worth the read. There are two obvious problems with this report from Christianity Today. First of all, it's good and right that these ministries serve vulnerable communities, including illegals and asylum seekers, who often fall into a gray area of legality. However, when it's time to deport illegals, that season of the ministry ends. And it's time for these ministries to serve people in a different way. Assist legal immigrants and perform outreach to these countries where migrants are coming from so that the people aren't attempted to break into another country. You should be serving Americans. On top of those concerns, Christianity Today and other victim-focused media are missing the fact that Americans are struggling with the implications of border crisis. Illegals have committed horrific crimes and have devastated communities of law-abiding Americans. If we want to fret over victims, let's not forget who this crisis has affected the most. We get lectured about loving our neighbor, but the press, including Christianity Today, seems way more interested in showing love to the illegal immigrants over the Americans. Unfortunately, the left-wing media, and I would squarely place Christianity Today in that camp, would rather paint a sob story about illegals that serves to demonize Trump and conservatives in general. Victimization only goes one way for the left. Unquote. So here's my point. Being biblical also means to have a biblical emphasis. Often religious people have the wrong emphasis because they're influenced so much by the culture, they watch too much CNN. The assumption of guilt is put upon law enforcement, not upon illegal immigration and open borders. Selena Gomez is crying for all of these illegal aliens, but why isn't she crying for the victims of these criminal illegal aliens? The White House put out a response from many of the mothers who lost children to these illegal immigrants, such as Tammy Hamilton, who was the mother of Kayla Hamilton. She writes, "You don't know who you're crying for. What about our children who are brutally murdered and raped and beaten to death and left on the floor by these illegal immigrants?" So as Christians, what values ought to take precedent concerning our opinions concerning immigration enforcement? Is having 10 million immigrants flooding over the border so necessary to compassion that we need to accept the murders, the drugs, the gangs? There can be misinformed, sinful priorities, and that needs to be corrected. And this brings us to another concept that I want to talk about. It's called the racism of low expectations. For some reason, even though we would never do a certain thing ourselves, we give other people a pass or an excuse to break the law, thinking these people are unable to help themselves because of their race, because of their background, because of their environment. We would never join a caravan and enter into another country in violation of their laws, but for some reason we give these migrants a pass. I hear that all of these young men are leaving their countries because of gang violence. You're telling me that these men, these young men, these fathers are so wimpy that they can't get together and create a community militia? Are you telling me that they're so inept that they cannot find a way to learn a skill and produce something productive in their own country? You see, those who have low expectations are usually leftists who live in ivory towers, who have never worked a day in their life, who don't know what it means to actually have to suffer and live off the land. And these leftists insult these people by claiming they can have only a good life in America. Now, I've discussed this before. The price of a house in Guatemala or Honduras or Mexico is between $10,000 and $30,000. In America, it's between $400,000 and $500,000. It's all relative. And the salaries are relative. It's all the same. These immigrants are really no better off in America. In fact, they're probably worse off. I mean, try to build a nice little bungalow on your own in the state of California. See what the code inspectors will do to you. See, these migrants were deceived by this false promise of coming to America and life is going to be wonderful. It's going to be utopia. And this was a false promise put forth by these immigration organizations and activists. Missionaries and pastors back in these home countries are telling these congregants, don't be deceived by the lure of wealth in America. As Jesus said in Luke chapter 12, beware and be on your guard against every form of greed, for not even when one has an abundance does his life consist in possessions. And remember what Paul wrote in 1 Timothy chapter 6? If we have food and covering, with these we shall be content. But those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a snare, and many foolish and harmful desires, which plunge men into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all sorts of evil. And some, by longing for it, have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. Remember what happened to Abraham's nephew Lot? He lifted up his eyes and saw the well-watered plains of Sodom. And he decided to move into Sodom for the money. We all know that didn't turn out very well. Now, sure, we can better ourselves and we can have godly ambition, but stop running away from your problems. Stay and make your community better rather than always looking for greener grass. The only way for the world to get better is by people staying and making their own communities great. What if everybody ran away from their problems? I was just reading over the holidays of Plymouth Plantation by William Bradford, the account of the Plymouth colony, that church congregation from England. They came to Massachusetts for the purpose of missions. The Indians pretty much gave them the land because the Indians didn't want it. For the Pilgrims, it was more about helping others than it was about helping themselves. But in regard to seeking a better location for themselves, after they had already arrived in Massachusetts, their elder, Robert Cushman, wrote to them the following, quote, although as it seems, you have discovered many more rivers and fertile grounds than where you are, Since by God's providence, the place fell to your lot, let it be accepted as your portion, and rather fix your eyes upon what may be done there, rather than languishing in hope after things elsewhere. If the land affords you bread, and the sea yields your fish, rest you a while contented. God will one day grant you better fare, and all men will know that you are neither fugitives nor discontents, but can, if God so orders it, take the worst for yourselves with contentment and leave the best to your neighbor with cheerfulness. That's right from the Bible. Having food and clothing, let us therewith be content. So is compassion and charity only about having these migrants stay in the United States? Well, that's not necessarily a godly conclusion. It's certainly an elitist, snobbish attitude toward other countries. It's certainly low expectations for these migrants. And it really smacks of Marxist materialism, where life and decisions are to be made on the basis of materialism. These leftist college students think they're helping these migrants with open borders because these college students are Marxist materialists. Am I being hard-nosed? Am I being uncompassionate? No. This is the way I treat myself, and this is the way I treated my own sons. These migrants will do just fine back in their home countries. They're not a bunch of babies. They can board one of these military transports and go back home. The whole adventure was a great learning experience. Now it's time to go home, learn a trade, start a business, go home and do some hustling. They joined these caravans knowing full well they were coming to America at a bad time with some bad hombres. They knew that this was too much immigration. They knew what these coyotes were doing was illegal. They knew they were skirting around the law. They just wanted to get into America before the next guy, before the door would shut. Besides, they heard promises of handouts. Why aren't they willing to go back home? Apply for citizenship and wait like everyone else? If they love America, they should be more than willing to accept a free ride home until everything gets straightened out. Instead, immigration organizations are having these illegals protest as if they have some God-given right to live in America. Just this last weekend, immigrants were protesting and blocking a freeway in Los Angeles, and they continually chanted, DEI, DEI. It's because of compassion on these migrants, biblically informed compassion. The same compassion of the missionaries and the pastors in their home countries that I believe being deported from America is not the end of the world. It may wind up being a better situation for these migrants in the long run. They were lied to by leftist ideologues. And if any of these immigrants still stay in America, they'll learn pretty soon that leftism in America, when it claims to help people, always hurts people. I hope these immigrants can get out of America while they can. That's true, Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 19. So show your love for the alien. And that's Matthew chapter 7, verse 12. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So I should stop here. I did want to go off into some more biblical instruction concerning the treatment of foreigners in ancient Israel. Nobody really understands this. Nobody ever wants to speak about the details because according to the law of Moses, the land was supposed to be divided equally among all the Jews. If any foreigner came into Israel, some Jewish person is going to have to give up a portion of their land and give it to a foreigner. And any foreigner would have to accept Jehovah God, like Ruth the Moabitess, or like Rahab the harlot. Immigration in Israel wasn't supposed to be what's happening now in America, where we're bringing in all of these foreigners so we can get cheap labor. PJ Media had this great article, Disturbing Similarities, Democrats on Slavery and Democrats on illegal alien labor. And the article contains all the arguments that Democrats used for slavery back in the 1850s. And it's the same arguments that they're using today to justify illegal immigration, that these foreigners need the work, that we're helping them with jobs. It's compassion because these people can't help themselves back in their home country of Africa. Well, you can't have it both ways. Babylon Bee summed it up in this meme. Democrats once again concerned about who will pick their crops. This is not compassion. Don't fall for their self-serving delusion. Thanks for listening. Be renewed in the spirit of your mind through the Word of God. And if you are renewed in the spirit of your mind, you're going to see the world much different than everyone else. May Jesus Christ reign.